The twin sons of Cathara IV cast long shadows across the crystalline forest, as Lavia pressed her massive paw against the convulsing body of her youngest cub. The small Cathari's blue-black fur had turned a sickly gray, and foam gathered at the corners of his mouth. His 6 eyes, usually bright with curiosity, now rolled back in agony. "Shh, little one," Lavia whispered, her translator collar crackling with emotion. Around her, the rest of her pack circled anxiously, their tails low and ears flat against their skulls. They knew what was happening. Thornvine poisoning, fatal within the hour. The cub had been exploring, as young ones do, and had bitten into one of the deceptively beautiful purple flowers that grew in the shadow zones. Now the neurotoxin was shutting down his nervous system, one synapse at a time. Lavia had seen this before. There was no antidote, no cure. The Cathari had lost countless cubs over the centuries to the Thornvine's lethal embrace. It was simply a fact of life on their homeworld, a harsh lesson about respecting nature's boundaries. "Pack Mother," one of her scouts called out, his voice tight with fear. "The human approaches." Lavia's head snapped up, her predatory instincts momentarily overriding her maternal anguish. Humans. The strange, nearly hairless creatures who had arrived on Cathara IV 3 cycles ago, claiming to be explorers and friends. The Cathari had allowed them to establish a small research outpost, but kept their distance. Humans were weak. No claws, no natural armor, no redundant organs. How they had survived long enough to reach the stars remained a mystery to most Cathari. Through the crystalline trees, she saw it approaching. The human named James, wearing his ridiculous environmental suit and carrying his ever-present datapad, he moved with surprising speed for such an ungainly creature, his bipedal gait covering ground faster than expected. "Stay back, human," Lavia growled, her translator rendering the warning in flat, emotionless standard. "This is pack business." But Marcus didn't stop. He dropped to his knees beside the dying cub, his gloved hands hovering over the small body. Behind his transparent helmet, his face showed an expression Lavia had learned to recognize. Concern. "Thornvine poisoning," Marcus said, not a question but a statement. His eyes, those strange forward-facing eyes that marked humans as predators despite their soft appearance, scanned the cub with frightening intensity. "How long ago?" 20 minutes, Lavia heard herself answer, though she didn't know why she was telling this alien anything. "There is no cure. Leave us to our grief." "There's always a cure," Marcus said, and his voice carried a certainty that made Lavia's ears perk up. "Nature doesn't create a poison without creating an antidote somewhere nearby. That's universal ecology. Give me a minute." The human stood and began examining the surrounding vegetation with manic focus, pushing aside crystalline fronds and scanning bark patterns. The rest of Lavia's pack watched in confusion, uncertain whether to attack this intruder or allow him to continue his strange ritual. 30 seconds passed, 45. The cub's convulsions were weakening, not a good sign. His small body was giving up the fight. Then Marcus made a sound, a sharp exclamation, and dropped to his knees near a cluster of thick, gnarled roots. He pulled something from his utility belt, then paused. Lavia watched as the human looked at his gloved hands, then at the root, then made a decision that would be discussed among Cathari packs for generations to come. Marcus removed his helmet. The Cathari gasped collectively. Cathara IV's atmosphere was toxic to humans, not immediately fatal but dangerous. Prolonged exposure caused cellular damage, respiratory failure. Every human on the planet knew this. They never removed their suits outside the sealed outpost, but Marcus had. And now, with his bare hands and teeth, he bit into the root, tearing away the outer bark to expose the pale, fibrous interior. A clear, viscous sap oozed from the wound. The human grabbed the root with both hands, squeezing more of the liquid into his cupped palm. "Trust me," Marcus said, his voice raw without the helmet's modulation. His eyes met Lavia's, and in that moment she saw something that transcended species. Desperation, determination, and an absolute refusal to accept death without a fight. "I know what I'm doing." Later, Lavia would wonder what made her nod. Perhaps it was the human's insane confidence. Perhaps it was the fact that her cub was already dying. Perhaps it was something deeper, a recognition of a kindred spirit, a fellow parent who would do anything, risk anything for the young. Marcus moved to the cub and carefully dripped the root sap into the small Cathari's mouth, massaging his throat to encourage swallowing. Then he applied more to the gums, the nose, anywhere the poison might be absorbed. Antidote root, Marcus explained, his breathing already labored from the toxic air. Grows in symbiosis with thornvine. The sap contains alkaloids that bind to the neurotoxin and neutralize it. Used it on Earth with similar plant pairs. Universal principle. Evolutionary arms race between poison and cure. Lavia watched the human's lips turn blue. His hands trembled, but he didn't stop, didn't reach for his helmet, didn't prioritize his own safety until every drop of sap had been administered. 1 minute passed, 2. The cub's convulsions slowed, then stopped. His breathing, which had been shallow and erratic, began to steady. Color started returning to his fur. The human collapsed backward, gasping, finally grabbing his helmet and sealing it back on. His suit's medical readouts flashed angry red warnings, but Marcus just laughed. A breathless, slightly hysterical sound. "He'll be okay," the human managed. "Keep him hydrated. The sap will do the rest." Lavia looked at her cub, now breathing peacefully, then at the human who had poisoned himself to save a creature he barely knew. The pack stood in stunned silence. "Why?" Lavia finally asked. "Why risk yourself for a cub that is not your own? Of a species that is not your own?" Marcus looked at her through his helmet, his human eyes bright despite his obvious pain. "Because that's what we do," he said simply. "Humans don't accept there is no cure. We don't accept that's just how it is. We fight. We adapt. We find a way. And we sure as hell don't let kids die if we can help it." As the human staggered back toward his outpost, his suit working overtime to flush toxins from his system, Lavia gathered her cub close. Around her, the pack began to murmur. Their worldview fundamentally altered. They had thought humans weak because they lacked claws. But they had been wrong. Humans were dangerous precisely because they were weak. Because being weak had forced them to become clever. Because being vulnerable had taught them to be brave. Because being soft had made them compassionate. And sometimes, Lavia realized as she watched her cub's eyes flutter open, sometimes compassion was the most terrifying force in the universe.